Hello everyone and welcome to this video for Raid Shadow Legends. In this video I would like to go over these new champions that they have added to the game, and I touched on this briefly in the last video. I will not be doing the fusion, but I wanted to go over and show you everybody that they're giving you in the game. And this is my second take because for some reason I found out that when I go in here and I go into the fusion and I go into this ready to use screen and I click this, these stats do not reflect this character's actual stats. 8,400, 500, right? Okay, if I go into the index and I go into the dwarves, and I don't know if this is a bug or what this happens to be. I want to show you that guy here very shortly because he's pretty cool. 16,800, 1,000. So you can see there's a definite difference. So we're going to go through, it won't be in any particular order, and I will do the epics. It'll be a little more difficult. I've got to try to remember where the epics are. Let me refresh my memory. I believe we have a Skinwalker, a Barbarian, a Dark Elf, and an Orc. Okay. So we're going to go through from the index, and I'm just going to start here from the top from the banner Lords, and I'm going to show you all of the new rares that they have given us. And actually there's only one new rare, and that is Quaystore. Quaystore has the base stats of 13,000 essentially HP, 1,200 attack, defense is 800, speed is a little bit low, a little more critical damage than you would see on standard, and his skills include attacks when enemy, inflicts 30% extra critical damage if this champion has less than 50% HP. You'll see this theme is running along with a stacking on debuff theme in all of these new champions. Attacks when enemy, places a 50% increase critical damage buff on all allies for 2 turns if this attack is critical, so he definitely will benefit from crit rate on this one. Attacks when enemy, has a 75% chance of removing 2 random buffs from the target, damage based on attack on all of these, because of course this is an attack based champion. I'd say the defense is a little low. I would focus on getting this defense up 1,000 points if I could, and then I would maybe get the HP up about 10,000 points if I could. I would aim at 10,000 more HP for this champion, 1,000 more defense, roughly speaking. I wouldn't worry about the attack power. He'll get plenty out of his sword. I think he's very close. I think somebody said 1,400 or 1,500 is where it starts to drop off, and there's not very much benefit to extra attack power on a champion. So I would probably not worry about that because I know he's going to get good attack from his weapon. I would just focus on his crit rate, crit damage, and his speed after I've done his defense and HP. I don't know if I should go through and show the epics from here or just wait on it, but I think I'll wait so I don't get confused. If I recall correctly, there are no high elves that are coming from this fusion. I'm going to adjust the microphone. Okay, Sacred Order. So we got quite a few that came up in the Sacred Order. We have this fella, Draconis. He does attacks when enemy, heals the ally with the lowest HP by 7.5% of the damage inflicted. Places a shield buff on all allies equal to 15% of this champion's max HP for 2 turns, so you definitely want to get his HP up for that. Attacks when enemy, removes all debuffs from the ally with the lowest HP, then heals him by 25% of the damage inflicted. Now this is an HP based champion. It looks like his focus is going to be, all his skills are going to be based off HP. So you want to get this HP, I would say double this HP if you can. And then give him at least 500 more defense, if not more. An attack, you can give him maybe another couple hundred attack, but he doesn't really need it because he's a defense champion. He'll do his most damage because his skills are based off of HP. He's an HP champion. He'll do the most damage based off of his HP, more than he would off of attack. Next one up we have is this Sanctum Protector. This guy is a defense-based champion. Attacks one enemy, has a 15% chance of placing a stun debuff for 1 turn, based off of defense. Attacks all enemies and places a 30% increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns. Focused again on defense, attacks one enemy, has a 70% chance of placing a provoked debuff for 1 turn, damage again based off of defense. And his kit is standard on that, but he's got a little higher resistance, I think. I think resistance is normally 30. Speed's a little low. Defense is not bad. You want to focus and build up on the defense on this guy because that's where he's going to do his damage. So get that defense as high up as you can possibly get it. And then worry about a little bit on his HP and attack. But focus on the defense. Focus after that on the crit rate and crit damage if you're going to use this champion. Next up we've got Headsman. This guy is obviously somebody that's worked as a beheader somewhere. Anyway, this is an attack champion with fairly high HP, reasonably high attack, and decent defense. So definitely want to get his defense up a little bit. I wouldn't worry too much about his attack. I'd worry about his defense up a little, his HP a little. He's going to get his attack power from his weapon. Speed is okay, but you want to get that up. He's got a slightly higher crit damage than normal. So definitely getting on the crit rate and crit damage. If we look at his kit, attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 10% chance of placing a fear debuff for 1 turn, which this is, I find, very useful in the arena. I'm using martial art right now, and that fear is the most useful thing that I have found for freezing up the enemy team and surviving, and then that based with his leech. I can understand why some people, well, just about everybody uses Madame Cerise that has her in the arena. This guy will be very good in the arena for this reason right here. Attacks all enemies, has a 30% chance of placing 100% heal reduction debuff for 2 turns. This again will be good in the arena. And inflicts 15% more damage to targets under heal reduction debuffs. So this guy is going to be very useful, I think, there. Get his defense up so he can survive, and his HP, of course. But everything else, once you get his crit and crit damage, he's going to be doing really good. And now we're going to go over and look at Purgator. This guy has pretty low defense. You're going to get that defense doubled at least, if not tripled. Attack is right about where it needs to be. HP might be a pinch low, speed's a pinch low. A little more critical damage than normal. Attacks an enemy 2 times, will ignore shield buffs. Attacks all enemies and inflicts 10% extra critical damage for each debuff on this champion, stacks up to 50%. So the more debuffs this champion has on them, the more 10% critical damage they're going to be able to do. Attacks when enemy decreases the target's max HP by 20% of the damage inflicted. So you want to get his damage up, and he's already on a good start here with this fairly high level of attack. So getting his crit rate and crit damage is going to help him really do some good, but you need to get that defense at least double so he is able to absorb hits. And then we have Solaris. This is an attack-based champion. He has pretty high HP, a little bit lower attack than the last guy, a little bit lower defense, really low on the speed, I would say, for this group. A little more crit damage than normal. His skills are attacks when enemy, has a 30% chance of removing 1 random buff from the target. Attacks when enemy, places a shield buff on this champion equal to 20% of the damage inflicted for 2 turns. These are all based off of attack. Attacks when enemy, has a 75% chance of placing a stun buff for 1 turn. Stun debuff for 1 turn. So this guy, again, same story. Get his defense up, maybe get a couple hundred more on the attack. Get his HP up a little bit, a couple hundred. Focus on the speed, crit rate, and crit damage if you get him. And you decide to keep him and use him, of course. Here we have Renouncer. This guy is old, he's tired, he can barely pick up his sword anymore. He's got pretty low HP compared to these other ones you've been looking at. But defense and attack seem to be about standard. Speed's pretty good, a little higher than normal crit damage. He attacks one enemy 2 times based off of attack, because he's an attack-based champion. Removes one random debuff from this champion that attacks 1 enemy. Heals this champion by 25% of the damage inflicted, so you definitely want to get that damage up. Attacks 1 enemy, places a 15% increased speed buff on all allies for 2 turns of the attack, kills an enemy. So you're going to want this guy hitting hard so that he can kind of one slot, because if you can do that, then you get this speed advantage. I can see a place for him in the arena, but only if you have really good gear and masteries on him and get him tuned up about right. But yeah, I'd focus on the defense, get that doubled at least, get his attack up a couple hundred, get his HP doubled if you can, and increase his speed and crit rate and crit damage. I think that would be the approach there. I don't know if you need accuracy so much on that guy. So it's Dune Strider. This is an attack champion. She has 14,000 HP. She has an attack of 1,300 and a defense of 600. So the defense is very low in this case. Again, higher than normal crit damage. Attacks on enemy, has a 30% chance of placing a 30% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Attacks 3 times at random. Each critical hit decreases the target's turn meter by 10%, so you need that crit rate up. Will only decrease the turn meter once per target. Attacks all enemies and attacks the enemy with the lowest HP. Has a 75% chance of placing a 100% heal reduction debuff on the enemy with the lowest HP for 2 turns. So some interesting skills here. Cooldown, that's pretty high. I'd triple this defense, and then I'd put a little into attack and HP. Then I'd focus on crit rate and damage, crit damage for this one, and the speed, of course. I don't believe we have any Ogrins. Let me see. Maybe we have one. We have one Ogre. That's right. Yes, I remember. This guy looks like he took a wagon, he took the yoke, he shoved a bunch of daggers into it, and that's his weapon. He's carrying around the chest from it on his back and a lantern, and he's carrying a wheel on his shoulder. I do not know what the joke is here, what the thought is here. This guy must really hate wagons or something. He's a support champion. He has an HP of almost 20,000. His attack is a little low. His defense is a little low. You want to get that attack up to at least 1,000, 1,200 if you can. You want to get that defense doubled at least. Standard on his crit rate and crit damage, but he does have 10 accuracy. Attacks one enemy, has a 35% chance of placing a 50% decreased accuracy debuff for 2 turns. I don't know the use of those debuffs. Attacks one enemy, place a 7.5% continuous heal buff on the ally with lowest HP for 2 turns. Attacks one enemy, has a 75% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Also, the 75% chance of decreasing the target turn meter by 15%. So I don't know how useful the kit is on this guy, but if you end up with him and you want to keep him, you gotta get those attack and defense numbers doubled if you can, and then we'll focus on the speed, crit rate, and crit damage. HP is pretty good for this champion, though. I don't think he's going to need a lot more to keep him alive. Do we have any new orcs? We have 1, maybe 2 new orcs. Let's see what we've got. Yeah, Ripper Fist is one of the new orcs. He's an attack-based champion, HP at 13,000. Attack is very good. Defense needs to be increased as well as speed. Crit damage is slightly higher than normal. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 30% chance of placing a 25% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. So this is a good skill for the clan boss. And attacks one enemy 3 times. Each hit places a 100% heal reduction debuff for 2 turns. If this champion has full HP, each hit places a 50% heal reduction debuff for 2 turns. If this champion has less than 100% HP. And his passive is a 25% increased attack buff on this champion for 1 turn, and decreases the cooldown of the Rip to Shred skill every time this champion's HP drops below 50%. So this guy seems to benefit a little bit from getting his HP below 50. And I think I've seen that. I think I saw one other champion too. Maybe not. I don't know about that. Anyway, get his defense double or tripled. Attack's pretty good. HP could be just raised up a couple thousand to be fine. Get his crit rate and crit damage up, and he's ready to go. Of course, you'll need accuracy for all of these various debuffs that he's going to do. I see some use there for that guy. And this is the other new Wyvern Bane. She's got her big old swords here for hunting the dragons. She's got 12,000 HP, 1,200 attack, defense is 900, a little higher crit damage than normal, speed's a little low. You're going to get her speed up, you want to get her defense up, and get her attack up a couple hundred. HP should be up a couple of thousand. Attacks when an enemy has a 20% chance of placing a 15% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns, based off of attack. Attacks when an enemy heals has a 35% chance of decreasing the target's turn meter by 20%. And attacks when an enemy has a 75% chance of placing an HP burn debuff for 2 turns. So she could possibly be using a clan boss, but I don't really know about her viability or usability. I have to think about that one. Undead I think has some, not sure. Maybe not. Yes, it does have. I don't have the... Everybody gets this guy, I never get him, and I don't know if I ever want to. And I don't ever get that guy either. He was required for a fusion. And then I think I got her, but this is one of the new ones. This is Drowned Bloat Wraith. I don't know what's sticking out of his head. This crazy looking fella is an attack-based champion. He's coming with 13,000 HP. His attack is decent at 1,300. Defense is a little low. Crit damage needs to be... Oh, it's a little more than normal, but speed's good. Skills are attacks when an enemy has a 15% chance of placing a stun debuff for 1 turn. The chance of placing the stun debuff increases by 5% for each debuff on the target. So here we are having this debuff stack type thing going on again. Attacks all enemies has an 85% chance of placing a 30% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Also has a 25% chance of placing a fear debuff for 1 turn on all enemies under a decreased defense debuffs. These are all based off of attack. Passive is heals this champion by 50% of their max HP every time this champion or an ally kills an enemy. So get his HP up because he can benefit from that too. And then focus on his crit rate, crit damage, get his speed up. But get this defense at least doubled, if not tripled. Attack, he can get a couple hundred more on the attack. But I think he's going to be pretty good just the way he is. And I still have to study that, of course. But he looks like he has some interesting abilities there. One of these days I'll get the Stitched Beast. And dwarves have quite a few new champions, and I want to start with the fun one right here. Ogre the Alchemage. This guy is a poisoner. He's a support champion with 16,000 HP, which is pretty good. Attack's low, of course. Defense is a little low. Speed's good. But look at him drop his staff, lose track of it, and try and pick it up again. I love that new animation they added. He has a little more accuracy than normal. Everything else is standard. Skills are attacks when enemy has a 30% chance of placing a 5% poison debuff for 2 turns. That's on his A1. Attacks all enemies has a 50% chance of placing a 25% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. Also places a 15% decreased speed debuff for 1 turn on targets under poison debuffs. Now this is pretty good for clan boss, and it can get cooled down to a 3 turn if you can book them out. And it will be easier to book out these rares than it will be any of the epics. So worth looking into. Fills the turn meter of all allies by 15%, heals all allies by 15% of this champion's max HP. If you can double this guy's HP, get his attack up by, say, double on the attack maybe. Get his defense, double if you can on his defense. Get his speed up and then get his crit rate and crit damage up. I think he's going to be pretty viable. Let me know what you think on that, but I think there's some use here to this guy. I kind of like him. I like his little staff. Well, big staff, I guess you could call it. Here's Dolar Lore Keeper. He's another one of the new champions. He is another support champion. He has a pretty good attack. Well, not great, but not bad. Defense is a little low. Speed's a little low, but standard on the other ones. HP is 16,000. Attacks one enemy, 25% chance of placing a block cooldown skills debuff for 1 turn based off of attack. Attacks when enemy has a 40% chance of placing a stun debuff for 1 turn if the target is under any debuff. So that's interesting. Places a 15% continuous heal buff on all allies for 2 turns. Also places a block debuffs buff on the target ally for 1 turn if they have less than 100% HP. And his aura skill increases ally HP in all battles by 15%. Anyway, some interesting kit here for sure, and looks like, yeah, get that defense tripled if you can, get that attack up maybe 200 or 300, 400 points, HP doubled, and then work on the speed, crit rate, and crit damage. He could be some use here, I think. I like his giant heavy shield. You know, it's pretty cool. This guy is Goro Brute Bane with the gigantic arms the size of his legs, and he is an attack champion. He has 16,000 HP, 1200 attack, 700 defense, speed is low, crit damage is higher than normal. Attacks one enemy 2 times, each hit has a 30% chance of placing a 30% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Attacks one enemy, damage increases by 5% for each debuff on the target. Here's that kind of skill again. Attacks one enemy, places a 15% crit rate buff on all allies for 2 turns if this attack is critical. And his aura skill is increase ally resistance on all battles by 30. So this guy is definitely somebody you're going to want to get that crit rate up. The defense needs to be doubled, if not tripled. Attack is okay where it is. You can raise it a couple hundred, it won't hurt anything, but I'd focus more on the speed, which is low, the crit rate, the crit damage, and then get that defense up so he has the ability to take damage. I could see some use for that guy. And our last one is Dilgo, and I'm probably the only, or the first one, maybe not the only, but the first one to mention our new champion that has a gun. This is a blunderbuss, or whatever they used to call these things. With, you see that barrel there that he has. Comes in as an attack champion. He has 15,000 HP, attack at 1,000, so that can be raised at least 500 points. Defense at 900, so that can be doubled. Speed is a little low, but not too bad. Crit damage is a little more than normal. Attacks one enemy, 40% chance of placing a 50% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. Attacks all enemies 2 times. Each hit has a 50% chance of placing a 50% decreased accuracy debuff for 2 turns. Accuracy, I mean. And I don't understand the use of decreased accuracy. Somebody will have to explain that to me someday. Attacks one enemy 3 times. Each hit has a 40% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. So, some interesting things here. A little bit of work needed to be done, but he could be pretty useful, and it's interesting to have somebody that has a gun, you know, in the game. It's the first time I've seen a gun in the champion with a gun in the game. I've seen crossbow, but I haven't seen a gun, not until now. And that's it for those guys. And so we have a couple of our new epics to look at. One of them is a dark elf. We have some legendaries to look at as well. So let's go ahead and we'll start with the other legendary. Well, there's 2 of them. We've got this big lady here, or Sugo Watercolor. She is an HP champion. Her HP is at 23,000. Her attack is very low. Her defense is pretty high. Her speed's pretty good too, surprisingly, and her resistance is up 20 points from normal. She has an aura skill, 33% increase ally HP in all battles. Her first attack attacks one enemy, has a 45% chance of placing a block cooldown skills debuff for 1 turn based off of HP. Attacks all enemies, places a 30% decreased critical damage debuff and a 50% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns on all targets whose attack is higher than their defense. Places a 30% decreased speed debuff and a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns on all targets whose attack is equal or lower to than their defense, based off of HP. That's going to be tricky to figure out how to set her up on that. Places a 50% ally protection buff on all allies except this champion for 2 turns. Places a 25% strengthen buff on this champion for 2 turns. And then she has this decreases the damage all allies receive from critical hits by 30%. That's her passive. So very interesting champion here. I would probably focus more on, I mean, she's an HP champion, so her attacks are to come from HP. If I could double that, I think that would be good. And then I would focus on defense. And then I would focus on the crit rate and crit damage, and then maybe speed, and then maybe attack a little bit. But I wouldn't worry too much about attack, but I'd try and get that to 1,000 if I could. I don't know for sure on that. I have to really think about it. But our other Lego that we can get, legendary, is of the Lizardman faction, and that is Vergum Car, and everybody's talking about this guy. And he's a support champion. He has 22,000 HP, attack is at 900, defense is at 1,100, speed's pretty high. He has also 20 points more than usual resistance and some accuracy. First, skill. Attacks when enemy has a 35% chance of placing a stun debuff for 1 turn. The chance increases by 15% for each buff on the target. So the more you buff this guy, the more stuff you can do with it. Removes all provoked debuffs and 1 random buff from all allies. Places a 60% increased defense buff for 2 turns on allies who have debuffs removed. Also places a shield buff on all allies equal to 20% of this champion's max HP for 2 turns. Attacks all enemies, removes 1 random buff from each enemy, has a 75% chance of removing 2 random buffs from each enemy, places a 100% block heal debuff for 3 turns on enemies who have 1 or more buffs removed. Also places a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns on enemies who have 2 buffs removed. Immune to provoked debuffs. Fills this champion's turn meter by 20% each time an enemy attempts to place a provoked debuff on this champion. Very good for somebody like if you're fighting miscreated monster or something like that does a lot of provoking. Any kind of champion that's been annoying with provoke will be good on this one, because the more provokes they put on this champion, the faster, the quicker they're going to be able to take their turn. I would probably try to... Let's see, their skills are based off of attack, and I don't see anything based off HP. So I'd try to raise the HP maybe 10,000 at least. I'd want to double if I can, or more the defense. Get his attack up maybe 500 at least to get the speed up, and then focus on a crit rate and crit damage if I were to get this guy. Overall, though, I think this is going to be the best use in the arena, and that's what everybody else is saying as well. And that's the legendary that you can get out of the fusion, which we will show briefly before I leave. We're going to go over here to the Dark Elves, and that's going to show us one of the epics we can get from the fusion. And that's this guy right here called Kayden, or Kayden. He's a defense-based champion with 1300 defense, attack at 800, and HP at 16,000. He has 15 accuracy, and everything else is pretty well standard. His skills are: attacks an enemy, has a 50% chance of placing a provoked debuff for 1 turn. I don't really see the use of that, but this one here I find interesting. Attacks all enemies, has a 75% chance of placing a 50% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns. Now this can be cooled down to 3 turns and increase the chances, and that's pretty good for clan boss, I would say. Revives 2 random allies with 50% HP and places a 60% increased defense buff on them for 1 turn. Then this can be knocked down to a 4-turn cooldown. So I see some really good use for this guy in the clan boss, but we need to get his speed up. We need to get his HP and defense up a little bit. His attacks are based off of defense, so doubling or tripling that defense, getting that HP up another 10 grand if you can, getting the attack up maybe 500 or so if you can, and focusing on the crit rate, crit damage, and speed. That's what I would do. This is definitely, if I had the champions, all of the rares to fuse for this guy, I would maybe go that far. And I'm not really taking part of the fusion, but if somehow I managed to get the champions that could get this guy, or got my hands on this guy, I would probably make some use of him, because this is really interesting to me, and I want more resurrectors for the faction crypts to keep my characters alive. We got Skinwalker is one of our other new epics that they've added. It's part of the fusion, and that's this lady, Fane. She's a mouse lady, kind of freaky looking, but she has a really good kit for the clan boss. She has HP at 13,000, attack at 1,600, which is really good, defense at 700. Speed's a pinch low, but not too bad. Get that speed up. Her crit damage is a little more than average, so focus on crit rate, crit damage. Get this defense tripled or even quadrupled if you can. Get the HP up at least 10,000 if you can. I wouldn't worry about the attack power. She's going to get a lot of attack use out of her weapons, so she should be good that way. Attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 35% chance of stealing 5% of the target's current turn meter. This will not work on a clan boss as far as I know. I've had no luck doing any turn meter stuff against a clan boss, but this will be very good for the clan boss. Attacks one enemy, has a 75% chance of placing 2 5% poison debuffs and a 50% decrease attack debuff for 2 turns. This is very good, especially with the cooldown and book her out, but she'll be a little harder to book than the rares because, of course, she's an epic, so it's going to require the slightly less common books. Attacks one enemy 3 times. The first hit has a 75% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 3 turns. The second hit has a 75% chance of placing a 25% weakened debuff for 3 turns. The third hit heals this champion by 4% of their max HP for every debuff on the target. So the higher her HP, the more that healing she's going to get, and the more debuffs on the target. So very good for the clan boss in that sense. But really going to have to make her livability working on that so she can stay alive. Very freaky design. I don't know about that. Now there's 2 more epics. I think one of them is an orc. And we just saw that message, so I have to wrap up and get out of here. And I believe that's this guy here, To Hack the Wanderer. This guy is an attack-based champion. His first skill attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit has a 30% chance of increasing the cooldown of one of the target skills by 1 turn at random. Increases the cooldowns of all the target skills by 1 turn. Instead, this champion has less than 50% HP when attacking on each hit. Second is attack all enemies, has a 75% chance of placing a 30% decreased speed debuff for 2 turns. Also places a 30% increased speed buff on this champion for 2 turns. Heals this champion by 15% of the damage inflicted if they have less than 50% HP when attacking. You see a theme here. Attacks one enemy, steals 50% of the target's current turn meter, has a 75% chance of placing a stun debuff for 2 turns, steals 100% of the target's turn meter if this champion has less than 50% HP when attacking. And then his passive is Ironheart, decreases the damage taken by this champion by 20% when their HP drops below 60%. He increases ally attack on all battles by 22%, but this kit means that you don't want to raise his HP too much. You want to tune that HP. You're going to focus on his defense, get that defense super high. And then his speed, his crit rate, and crit damage. Crit damage has been increased by 10 points, so that's pretty nice. But get his accuracy up for the debuffs that he's going to apply and try to do. But focus on that defense because that'll allow him to, as I understand it, that'll allow him to absorb damage. But you want that HP to drop a little to that 50% level, or around that 50% level when he's attacking, and still stay alive while he's doing it so he can take advantage of all these skills. So this guy's going to be very tricky to tune and work with, but if you can figure it out, I think his attack is good. We just got to get his HP up and then he'd be able to live a little longer. So the last of the epic fusions is Baroth the Blood-Soaked, an HP champion with 20,000 HP, 800 attack, defense at 1,000, speed is okay, resist is up, I think 15 points from normal. First attack one enemy 2 times. The first hit has a 20% chance of filling the target's turn meter by 10%. The second hit has a 20% chance of decreasing the target's turn meter by 10% based off HP. Attacks one enemy 2 times. The first hit places a shield equal to 25% of the damage inflicted on all allies for 2 turns. The second hit heals all allies by 10% of the damage inflicted. Attacks one enemy 2 times. The first hit has a 75% chance of placing a 50% decreased attack debuff for 2 turns and a 75% chance of removing any increased attack buffs from the target. So this is useful for the clan boss here. As well as this, the second hit has a 75% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns and a 75% chance of removing any increased defense buffs from the target. So some definite kit that's useful here. In order to make this work, though, you're going to want to get this guy's, it looks like you're going to want to get his damage up really good. So you're going to want to get his attack, I would say double his attack, and maybe go a little higher than that. And I would focus on his defense next, then speed, then crit rate and crit damage. Most of his damage is going to come from crit rate and crit damage, and if you double his attack, he should be able to hit pretty hard, and that'll allow you to get the maximum use out of these skills. So I'll show you the layout real quick and we'll wrap up because the game's about ready to shut down on me. So I think we covered everybody. Those are the epics going to the fusion. These are the rares that we have talked about. I don't believe I missed anybody. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this. Any feedback or suggestions you have for how I presented this, let me know. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. If you did not like this video, give it a thumbs down, but leave me some feedback so that I can improve. I appreciate it. Subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Tell me what you think about some of these new champions that we got. I'm kind of looking forward to some of them. I don't really care about the fusion. I just hope I can pull some of these out of the next double raid event or something, but let me know what you think. Just a quick plug here. If you click on the referral link that you will find at the bottom of my videos, you will get these free goodies on your sign up. And I will be doing a series to help you get started in the game. So this is a quick shout out to the one individual that has signed up under my with my referral link, and now I'm going to be changing the links to my second referral link, and I'm going to be doing that series here very shortly. But just something to let you know that if you want to try Raid Shadow Legends, you can get started and get some free goodies in the process. Thanks for taking a look. I'm going to check on my goodies here, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.